Welcome to Comic Book School Live, our weekly YouTube show about the craft and business of making comics. I'm glad to see you back, and I hope that tonight you are as excited as I am about our guest, Jimmy Palmiotti. He is an absolute force in comics and media. He has done so much, and he is also one of the most fun people to talk with. Let me read you his bio because I think that this is relevant. Even if you think you know Jimmy, let me give you the read. Jimmy Palmiotti is a multi-award-winning comic book creator with a wide range of experience and background in advertising, production, editorial, film, writing, production, media, and video games. His clients include Marvel, DC, Nike, Disney, Warner Brothers, Lionsgate, Fox, New Line Cinema, 2K Games. He has co-created and or created numerous series, including The Big Con Job, The New West, The Monolith, 21 Down, The Resistance, The Pro, Gatecrasher, Beautiful Killer, and one of my favorites, Painkiller Jane. He's worked on nearly every major character at Marvel and DC Comics, leaving a giant impact on the development of characters like Harley Quinn, Power Girl, and Jonah Hex, just to name a few. And at Marvel Comics, Jimmy teamed with Joe Quesada to create the Marvel Knights imprint and usher in a radical change at the way comics are made at Marvel Comics and still felt to this day. On a separate note, Jimmy has been a friend and mentor to many comic book creators and is often referred to as the godfather of comics, but he's so much more than that. Jimmy helped me break into comics as a writer by graciously agreeing to co-write Deadpool to get my first published credits. And then he took me under his wing to educate me on how comics were made. Since that time, I really had no idea. But it's worth noting that without Jimmy's advice and input, there would actually be no comic book school. But that's a story for another time. Please welcome Jimmy Palmiotti.
Hey buddy, how's it going?
I am really excited to see you, Jimmy. How are you? How are you doing these days?
Good. You know what I love about your name, buddy. It's like when I can't remember somebody's name, I'll say, "Hey, buddy." But with you, it's actually like on the nose. Like more people should be named Buddy. It'd make my life so much easier.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad that I simplify a couple things in this world. And where are you dialing in from, Jimmy?
I'm in Clearwater, Florida,
Mm-hmm.
right now, and crazy Florida, as everybody else calls it. Trying, just kind of staying out of the way of all the trying to stay away from all the crazy people that this is I call Florida the Wild West. Forget California, forget the West Coast. Like Florida is like the Wild West. There's like hardly any rules. People are crazy. They do anything. It's the most impulsive state, I think, in the United States. People just do anything.
Everything is legal in Florida, right?
It is. I mean, marijuana is not, but you wouldn't know it, and you're not allowed. You're not supposed to ride on manatees, but people manage to do that too. So this. I like it because unlike I grew up in New York and in Brooklyn. Here I have an actual parking space for my car and a backyard. I didn't have that when I was in Brooklyn, so it's kind of nice to have a house. I like to play my music loud and walk around with next to nothing on, so it's perfect.
But I know that you come back every once in a while to ride the Cyclone, right?
Yeah, well, or at least go to Nathan's and have a hot dog and watch crazy people yell at each other. It's Coney Island's like that. It hasn't really changed. They can keep fixing Coney Island, but you're never going to be able to take the crazy out of the place. So,
No.
yeah.
Hey, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When I was prepping for this, I had my producer Dee Alley, who will come on later, and she was not familiar with you because she comes from animation, and her actual quote was, "Holy cow, this guy is prolific." I
Yeah.
mean, how do you do it, Jimmy? How do you manage to stay prolific for all these years?
I think part of being creative is being challenged all the time. So instead of going the easy way of doing the same thing over and over and doing it well, I tend to do a lot of things that I do half-fast. And I have this gigantic learning curve that I'm on, but I tend to I'm interested in trying new things all the time. So with that comes, taking on a lot of work and doing things that, even in comics, I kind of when I was inking them, I wanted to write them. When I'm writing them, I want to draw them. When I'm drawing them, I want to edit them, and then I want to publish them. And I just not a person that sits there and says, I've never been the guy that said it's my lifelong dream to write Spider-Man. And so I'm going to write Spider-Man for the next 40 years, you know? um, and I'm not that guy that wants to stay on one book either. You know, I like to visit the characters and then move on. You know, and happy accidents happen to me along the way, you know, getting on something that actually hits pretty well. But a career is you know, and my career and most people's careers is a giant roller coaster. You know, you have your ups and downs, and when it's downs, you get like really, that's kind of exciting and challenging for me, because when you're really successful, there's some kind of it's not so comfortable. Like you get things, but you have less challenges because people are just, there's a couple of points where I was working where no matter what I did, everybody, it's like, oh, that's great. And that's great. And I'm like, no, it's not, you know, you know, I definitely have that inner voice of saying, that could have been better. And I need to get better at this. And I was talking to somebody today about writing, and I just said, yeah, I'm trying, man. I'm like on this like learning curve, you know, that never straightens out, you know, because I'm trying to get better all the time. And I read some other people's work, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I see what that's what people want. Okay, you know, because I tend to write for myself, you know, if I can entertain myself. And I write for my wife. Like Amanda and I sit together. If we can make each other laugh, like in Harley, we tried to challenge each other and make each other laugh. And that was it. And then we were hoping other people would get it.
And I guess they did. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
you built a big audience with that. And I think one of the things that you said was amazing. A lot of people don't know that when you broke in and when I met you,
Right.
you were an inker. And then you became the inker that everybody went to as sort of the go-to person. Well, Jimmy Palmiotti, inker. And you said recently, not too, actually about a year or two ago, you said, there are now people who are my fans as a writer that have no idea that I was an inker.
Yeah. Once in a while, somebody tells me that, hey, is this right? Did they credited you for inking this book? And I'm like, yeah, that's because the first 10, 15 years of my career, I was inking 2-3 books a month, you know, and I came from advertising, right? So like out of college, I went into advertising. I didn't go into comic books. There was no money in comics. And in advertising, you have to hit deadlines. You have to you have to do a professional job, hit your deadlines, and understand when to leave the room, you know, understand when, here's my work. Thank you so much. I'm out of here. And I understood early on that, you know, the job of the editor is he just wants to hire the guy that's going to make his job the easiest. So I approached comics. When I started doing comics, I was like, I would pop in the office. I would hand the book in early. If it was due Thursday, I'd come in Tuesday with the book and say, hey, if you got anything else, let me know. And I never left Marvel Comics. It was at Marvel at the time. I never left there without a book or two. Like, because my reputation was that not only does he do a good job, but he gets it in early or on time, and he doesn't hang around the office like a dead weight, you know, because a lot of people would go up to Marvel and sit there for hours, and that was not me. And I had a little mentality of, you know, if you're gonna hang out with me, we're gonna have fun, you know. I enjoy people, so if we hang out, we're gonna have fun. No matter what, we're gonna laugh. We're gonna talk about stuff. I'm definitely a social person, so along with what comes with that is making friends with, of course, people and them wanting to give you work, you know. So it was a whole bunch of things going on, but I think doing advertising before comics really helped my approach when I started doing comics. And then there was the thing where people trusted me, where they said, okay, you know, hey, why don't you do this, or would you like to do that, and I would go, I've never done it before, but I'll make it look good, you know, or you know, or even when our mutual friend Mike Martz said, would you like to write Deadpool? I'm like, absolutely, yeah, why not, you know, I'd love to do that. And you know, it wasn't about you know, overthinking it. It was like, it's due on Thursday, get it done, you know. And a lot of times, you know, you sit there and go, is it good enough? Is it good? You know, the superpower we have with writing is editing ourselves. You know, we can put it down and then edit and look at the dialogue, cut it in half, cut it in half, cut it in half, get it down to a pure thing. But I learned all these really good lessons in advertising. So I went into comics it was actually kind of easy to do, because the deadlines weren't too bad, and the clients were editors that were like my age and older, and they were really they really liked the profession. If I, I was very professional, so they really liked that interaction. And like I said, that's, if I came in, it was like I came in, I came out, and if they wanted me to stay, they would have to ask me to stay in the office. They say, "Hey, Jimmy, can you hang out for a little longer, or you want to grab a drink or a bite to eat?" And so part of that is, some part is like having the talent, another part is being able to represent yourself, and then actually being able to read people, to sit with them and, understand when it's time to go, understand what they're going through. Empathy is a big part of this job that people don't talk about, is understanding the situation the person you're working with is in, and how can you help, right? There's always a nice question to somebody, how can I help? I think that helped my at least when I started, that helped my career a lot.
Yeah, I was always impressed with how well you could interact with all levels, and not just editors, but also publishers and business people, convention organizers, and fan press. I mean, you really took the time to get to know people and what motivated them, and then spoke with them and made them feel special. And I think that was part of your superpower.
Well, I think everybody is special. So I definitely, it was, I worked with people that were dismissive of the people around me. And I was never that guy, because I started from the bottom, right? So I understood what it was to kind of be in a place of, hey, I'm trying to break in, or nobody's giving me attention, or nobody's listening to me, or I'm working hard and I can't get a break. And I understand that, and I thought, well, that was like people helped me along the way. So I just return a favor. I still do it. If somebody sends me to work or something, I'll still look at it or give them some advice. And, I think it's in my nature to do that. I just think it does have something to do with empathy and understanding that we're all in the same spot. And I do get the passion. People love comics and they want to make comics. So I totally get it. That's never going to go away. I got to say, it's like, I don't feel that different than when I started, which is a very weird thing to say, especially I'm much older, but I still feel it's like I got to earn all the time, no matter what I do, I got to keep proving myself.
Oh, I think that's natural. I mean, this is a business where, reputation only goes so far. You got to produce. And I think one of the things that was really notable about what you and Joe together, and some of the other people were at the time when you were launching Marvel Knights, there was so much buzz, and you threw these great parties, and it actually brought a lot of people together. And I think you just made the whole business feel like just like a community. And I remember one night I was getting ready to leave, and you were like, "No, stay to the end. This is how you become a pro." And it's become advice that I give to everybody. People say, how do you break into comics? I'm like, stay until after 2 a.m. Close the bar.
Well, I think part of that is bonding. Part of that, I wanted to, when they closed the bar, then we'd get breakfast delivered in the bar. They'd lock the door and we'd stay in. I definitely we had a lot of that going on. But when I got into the comics with Joe, and it was like 94, 95,
right,
and we were making a little money, I didn't understand why the DC people hung out here and the Marvel people hung out here and the Valiant people hung out here. And especially since I was going up to each company, I was seeing people. I was like, Joe and I came to the decision. We said, let's throw some parties and just get everybody to come. It didn't cost us anything. It was just the bar that we were in. They were like our buddies. And I said, hey, we're going to throw a party on Thursday night. They'd be like, great. And we would invite everybody from Marvel, DC, Valiant, whoever was in town visiting,
Wizard, right? That's
of course Wizard all the time. I mean, look, there were people that did things for Wizard, and then there were people like me that went up there.
Yes,
all
you
the
did.
time. And I would go up, and I would walk around and see what you guys were doing in the office and
Yeah.
talk to Garib and, you know, later on Fred. But I mean, when Garib was there with his dad and, you know, in Congress, I think it was Congress, right? And
That's right.
yeah, and we'd go up there. We go to Pine Man for lunch on 303, you know. But I loved going up there because I loved to see the process of what you guys were doing and what you had coming up. And, you know, the other part of me was like, how can we get in this magazine more? Like, what can we do to publicize? Because people forget, no internet back then, right? So Wizard Magazine was the internet for comics back then. You got Wizard Magazine that had everything in it. And they had the top 10 artist list forever. And I used to tell people, I think I had at one point, I had on my card, it said number 11 for 4 years straight on the Wizard top 10 list, you know. But that was the place we knew, I knew that was the place I need to, you know, not just be this background guy that does the work. I have to actually put my face on the work. I have to, you know, this was important because with that comes a value, you know. So when we did Event Comics, you know, Joe and I were out there, you know, doing contests for Wizard Magazine, bowling contests. We did a whole bunch of different contests. But, you know, we always said you have to put our photos in with the article. People have to see who we were. And it's a tradition I keep now, even with the stuff I do with paper films. It always has everybody's photos on the inside of the books.
Nice.
That's a very Wizard thing, right?
Yeah.
But you know, I knew that you know, my name had to build up my name and to give me power in this business. I had to kind of make sure everybody knew who I was, and part of that was going out there and throwing a party and meeting people, going upstairs to Marvel. Not just stay on the 10th floor, go up to the 11th floor, see the people that are doing the licenses, meet the Terry Stewarts, meet Stan, go see Stan upstairs, introduce yourself, and, you know, and then see how, just talk to them and get to know them. And I've always done that. Same thing with DC, same thing with Valiant, you know, at the time. And again, and then Harris, right?
Right.
Doing well and all that. So you get these relationships, and with the relationship comes, hey, you know, I can help you, you can help me. And, you know, that's basically the core of the business. Now it's a little tougher because we don't have the face-to-face unless we're at cons or we're doing what we're doing right now. You and I are doing, being live, but it's still the same thing. You know, you being a pro is pretty much means that you get your work done, you're responsible, and you understand that you're just one person in this group of people making the book. So you have a responsibility to get your work in on time, because especially if you're a writer, you can't leave an artist waiting.
Yeah.
I know what that's like. I have an artist upstairs, and if she's waiting for a script, she's on to other things, you know? So it's
you always had a great sense, Jimmy, of marketing. And I think, you know, you always made a great point of, yes, you completed the book, but then there's another phase, which is getting people to buy the book.
Right.
Can you just talk about your observation of the responsibility that creators have and how they might want to approach it?
Well, you know, so there's a couple of different type of creators, right? Because we have the artists that don't like to socially get out there, and that's so that art has to. Amanda's a good example of that. I mean, her social media is next to nothing. She lets all her art do the thing, but when she is at a con, of course, she's the most personable person. But the rest of the time, she's working. So it's just part of what you do. You have to, you know. I look at the guys like the Jeff Smiths and the Terry Moores and the Mike Mignolas, and, you know, I say their names and you can see their characters right away.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, so that kind of stuff is so important, because at the end of the day, Marvel and DC does not, well, I'll be honest with you, Marvel and DC does not care about you past how you can make them money. So there's no retirement fund. There's no retirement anything for these companies. If you do stuff that winds up in a film, sometimes you get a check. Most of the time you get a little thank you at the end, and you're supposed to kiss the ground. So realize that doesn't pay your bills either. And, you know, you can work for a page rate forever, but unless you own some IP along the way, you're going to be another guy that just does Marvel and DC comics. And then how you retire is you sit at cons, and you draw that character 100 times over, and you keep charging a couple of bucks here and there. But there is no retirement. There's no long plan for most people, and I look at it completely different. I don't depend on the companies. I understand who I am with the companies. However they can use me, that's what they do. When they're done with me, I'm on to something else. So.
That's right. And you understand that it's a relationship of business and convenience, right? I mean, that's one of the things that you've always been good at, is understanding the nuances of being a freelancer. And what I wanted to ask you, like, what are one or two things that people who are at the beginning of their career need to know about being a successful freelancer?
Okay, so if you're thinking about, so you're selling yourself. There's a word for it. I'm blanking on it, buddy. Help me with the language. Where you're the thing that you're selling.
You're the product. You're the brand.
Branding. So branding is really important. And early on, if you're going to sit on the internet or you're going to go on social media and start picking on other artists or saying negative things about people, you will get branded as that guy. Yeah. And there is a certain amount of people like me that have great memories of when people are complete a-holes to them. And they never get another shot in my book because I just don't have time I have so many great people. The people that are fantastic, I will stand behind them and boost them forever. But so if you're starting out, I would say you're what you want, your brand should be your work, not what you're saying. Okay, so if you're an artist, it should be your work. If you're a writer, it should just then be your writing and not. I see a lot of people, they get attention by being the guy that's going out and bad-mouthing this guy, or they're commenting on other people's art and saying, and it's like always the wrong thing. They get a little attention for a while and then nobody wants to work for them. And I'll tell you what, people don't understand that Marvel, DC, all these companies look at Twitter, look at Facebook, and they look at Instagram, and they look at every one of their talents' threads, their social media. They read them every day. And because I have proof of that. And so they read it every day. And when you say something that they don't like, they just check it off, or they go, okay, they'll either make a mental check or they'll write it down and say, look, this person might be a problem. In the future, let's avoid hiring them. And people think that doesn't happen. And oh my God, does it happen? And
you'll never know.
You'll never know.
You'll never know.
You'll show your work and it'll be great, but they'll be like, no, well, but we have somebody else in mind. And you like, but I'm so much better than that guy. Look at my work. And they're like, it's okay. I've been in a room with editors where they say, yeah, we don't want to hire that person. Because that person is, everything they do is like a headbutt and a confrontation. And then they go badmouth at the minute where they're done with the company. They make it their business to badmouth everyone that they ever worked with, and even when those people were good. And there's nothing more sad when people do that. They pull out people and say, "Oh, this guy didn't, he didn't let me do this or that." It just makes the people seem bitter and angry, and nobody wants to hang out with bitter and angry. Yeah. Nobody wants to do business with bitter and angry. They want somebody that's going to wave a flag for whatever project they're working on. I see somebody asking, do they come quietly blackball people? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if that's like such a term, like they talk like they're all in one room and they say never hire this guy. But I will say that if you blow a deadline or two, they do sit there and go, let's not get that person. They blew a couple of deadlines for us. We need to have this book out by the 8th. So he's not the right person, or she's not the right person for the book. That happens every day. Yeah. Because they have schedules. So it's not even, I won't call it blackball. I'm just saying, if you're a problem child and then there's an easy person in the same room and that's going to get the job done, an editor is going to hire the easy person.
I remember this at one time you told me there was a triangle, the freelancer's triangle, which is, right, you can only have two: good, fast, and cheap. But you at one point instructed me that even with the triangle, there's one invisible point, which is likability.
Yes.
And I think that, knowing that the triangle in the business sense, good, fast, or cheap.
Yeah.
But likability is also that X factor.
It is. I've been in rooms with editor-in-chiefs that said we'll never hire that guy again because they screwed up a deadline, like so bad. And then a year later they hire them for something else. So that happens too. It's just they have shorter memories than me. So that's what but no, I mean, if you think about it, an editor's job besides overseeing the book, they don't want to work that hard. They don't want to have to call your house 15 times looking for work. They got stuff to do. They hire professionals. That's what they hire. And if you're not going to act like a professional, eventually you're not going to get work. And the more professional you are, the more work you're going to get. Now, for artists, especially, if you're late with every book, the editors have a thing where it's like they have to get the book out. And then on Wednesday or a Tuesday, all the editors get together with the editor-in-chief and they say, what's the status of the book? And you go, well, I know it's due Friday, but we only have like 7 pages. Well, guess who's in trouble?
Yeah.
And that goes down the line because he takes it out on you, and then you take it out on your dog. I don't know, whatever. So I won't say they blackball people. I will say though that if you screw up enough, you definitely your name is passed around. These are people. These are regular people that talk to each other every day during lunch and tell each other stories about their freelancers. And guess what? When they go to cons, the companies all get together and hang out and have dinners, and they go, I got screwed. This guy screwed me out of this, or this gal promised me 2 scripts and I didn't get it. And that stuff happens, and it's not blackballing. It's not some list on a piece of paper. It's just people talk. And so that's why it's really important for you to be professional. And again, we knew a guy that every time he would call in, he'd have a different excuse. And we used to write them down because they were really creative. But you can't kill your own grandmother 4 times. You can't go to her funeral 4 times. FedEx tracks packages. So if you say FedEx lost a package again, we go, well, what's the number of the there was a lot of excuses going on way back when. So again, being professional means you're going to get more work. I don't know. We're rambling.
I think it's really relevant, Jimmy. And I think, there's a point in your career where you have proven yourself and you've got name recognition and you've got your own fan following. And then there's the point where many of our students are right now, which is they're either at their first step,
right,
second step, or maybe even trying to get to that first or second step. That's not a time to mess with your reputation.
No, I mean, look, I have guys, and I have people you send me, Buddy, come over and introduce themselves, say, hey, I'm working with Buddy. I'm trying to do this and I'm trying to do that. And of course, I'll sit there and say, yeah, how can I help you? What do you think? Let me look at your work, and I'll go, okay, obviously you hate hands. So, I'm going to send you home to draw hands for the next month. But, it's stuff like that. That's great. Right.
Yeah.
But if you're going to come up to me and tell me how great you are, mm-hmm. and then you ask me for my opinion, I give you an opinion, you don't like it, and you get angry, mm-hmm. That's on you. That's not on me. I always say to people, do you want my honest opinion, or do you want to feel better about yourself? And most of them say honest.
Yeah.
But you have to understand it's art and it's interpreted. So not everybody sees everything the same. So you have to have a little bit of a thick skin. Somebody tells you your story is terrible. Instead of arguing with them, say, hey, well then how do you think I can make it look work better? Or how do you think can I salvage this? Or do you think I should start over from the beginning? It's an easy thing. If you're available to learn, you're going to do great. But if you're going to
available to learn, I like that. The availability in your mind to learn requires a certain receptivity, right?
Yeah, I absolutely. Look, I'll be honest with you. We had an editor, Chris Conroy, on Harley Quinn. Every once in a while, Chris would leave us alone, but when he would come in with a note, it was hot. I'd be like, that's a really good note. I'm going to change that. He would say, hey, you know what? Joker might say this instead of that. And I'd be like, you know what? That's so much better than what I had. Don't mind if I steal that? No, use it. Go ahead. So you have to take the ego out, right? I think the ego's dangerous. I got to be honest with you. I've seen it destroy people, and the guy that comes to the con and is there for 3 days, but he only signs for 2 hours a day. That's when the ego's gotten, he's forgot the connection of what he's doing,
Yeah.
or they want that. They want to be treated special. It's not a business. We're not celebrities. You're not going to be famous doing this unless you I used to say unless you kill Bin Laden, but I'll have somebody else. But you know what I'm saying? You're not going to be famous doing comics. And I always say the most famous person in comics, who is it, buddy? The most famous name?
Stan Lee.
Stan Lee. After Stan Lee, you ask any person on the street, hey, who's the most famous person in comics? Good luck.
Good luck.
So if you think you're going to be famous in comics and that means something, get over yourself, man. A guy on the worst TV show is more famous than you any day of the week.
You're right. And so anyway, I want to transition to the other part of the topic, and a lot of people are very interested in, and I think it's worth just being a little transparent. When Kickstarter was coming out, and there was this new channel, you were an early adopter. If I recall correctly, you said careers have ups and downs.
Yeah.
You had an up and down, and I think if I remember correctly, you were in a little bit of a down, and you were like, you know what, I'm going to try this new thing because you knew you had an audience, and you saw this as an opportunity to get your stories out the way you wanted to see them. Do you remember your mindset when you first started using Kickstarter and where you were in your career?
Sure. I stopped inking. So I decided I didn't want to ink anymore for a while. I was like, had enough of that. Nobody's going to take me seriously as a writer unless I really dig in. And I was getting a lot of like gigs that they were not bad gigs. They were just like, not mainstream stuff. Buddy, you know this, I would get every weird character,
Yeah.
I would get and I kind of like the challenge of that. The idea that somebody, this is a character nobody even thought of that would be worth viewing or reading about. And I liked it, but I noticed that, people were getting much better gigs. And then I also was noticing like, I really want to just write some of my own stories, but how do I do that when every creator owned thing I did where I kind of went in like Monolith or Resistance or whatever would last like 7 or 8 issues. Like it just wouldn't, I couldn't break that, thank God I was happy that I even got those 7 or 8 issues, but it never went past that. And I was like, okay. And then I saw this, so I was in a part of career where I was like, nah, I want to do other things. I want to write something weird and, something more to my taste, which is adult. I kind of like adult material. And then I read about this thing, Kickstarter, and people were using it. They weren't using it for comics. They were using it to just to crowdfund like different projects and things like that. And there was a couple of comic books on it, but they were like really indie, odd things, and they were like raising $1,000 or $500. And I looked at it and I was like, I wonder if I could do like a Kickstarter book on this. And then I tried to figure out, so do I do the book ahead of time or do I go out there and try to get the money? And there was no other pros doing the Kickstarter at the time. So I didn't have anybody to ask, but I did ask them a million questions. I sent them emails and just said, hey, look, I introduced myself and I said, look, how does this work? And how much do you guys take? And, and what's my commitment for shipping and all that kind of stuff. And the first one I did was a book called Queen Crab. And I think I just was like, okay, this is a little weird. I'm not even going to try to sell this to a comic company. I'm going to see if I can just kickstart this. And yeah, and I learned on that first one how many friends I had. Because when you do your first Kickstarter, you have to get your friends. But a lot of people are like, I'm not giving my credit card on that thing. Jimmy, yeah. I love you, but what is this thing? But I did hit the goal, and I did pay everybody. Everybody got paid, and we put the book out, and it was successful. And I learned, okay, so there's a postage thing, and there's a packing thing, and then there's a commitment to everybody that backed it because it's like a grassroots thing. You actually see everyone's name and address.
Mm-hmm.
And so these people are really important. Anybody that backed it, I'm like, these are good friends, or people that like my work. And so it's a real grassroots thing. And by the time I got to my third or fourth one, I was starting to figure out things correctly. Like, okay, if I'm going to do a print, it's got to be smaller than the book, because if it's bigger than the book, I have to pack a package bigger. So if I put it in the hardcover book and it's smaller, it's instantly protected. I could ship that. Yeah, I started learning size things, and Don't offer shot glasses. Don't offer t-shirts. Nobody wants a t-shirt. Nobody wants it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's all there
All
is
right.
to it. Don't offer big prints. Nobody wants the big prints. They don't. They, and then you got to ship it separate from your book. And so I started learning with every one of them. And I think I've done 16 or 17. I have another one coming up soon with Painkiller Jane. But I still learn on every one of them. The last one I learned a little bit. I learned that the printers are having problems with paper right now. So so there's some issues with getting my books printed on time, which I just kind of relay that to the people that back it and say, look, it's going to be a little longer. This is what the printer told me. Again, I learned that communicating with my audience is
Yeah.
important. And I also but at the end of the day, it also taught me, hey man, I keep my own IP. Anything I create here, I own. This is fantastic. Like, I don't need a comic company. I just need a certain amount of fans willing to pay a certain amount of money. And my brain went from, I'm working on the most popular comic, I'm a top 10 person, to, hey, you know what? I got 1,000 people that'll back me for $20 each. That's hell of a lot better than being the top guy on this comic book for Marvel and DC. Because at the end of the day, they'll make the Harley Quinn movies till the cows come home, and the first two guys that created Harley are getting the bulk of that money. That doesn't matter that they use our material, and I don't own Jonah Hex, and I don't own Power Girl. I should, but I don't. All that kind of stuff. Even Marvel Knights, they'll make TV shows and movies, and in the end, it's like, it's I don't own it, So it made a difference doing the Kickstarters.
I think one of the things that I've observed for your career with Kickstarter is this idea that you own this audience, Jimmy. I mean, you have a contract with the audience that you're going to come out with a wide range of stories with different artists. But at the end of the day, the contract that you have is with Jimmy Palmiotti, and the people that you support you and come back time and time again is because you fulfilled your end of the contract, which is you did a story, you did it at a level of quality. I own this. I got this Painkiller Jane book. It came in. It's the printing is gorgeous. You put a note in there, right?
Yep.
And I think that was you talking with your audience. How important is it for Kickstart creators to build that relationship, and how can they maintain it between Kickstarters?
Well, okay, so your social media helps between, right? Because that's a place you can go to every day and talk. But I also have, like yourself, I have a mailing list that Paper Films has a mailing list. We have over 5,000 people on this mailing list. So it's not that I go on a mailing list and talk, because basically the mailing list is me saying, here's where Amanda and I are going to be soon. Here's a book we got coming up. But it's not an interaction thing, right? With the Kickstarter, I have a commitment. These are people's hard-earned money.
Yeah.
And I'm a real freak about paper quality, and something when I hold it should feel like I should be able to feel that money went into it.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't get a book from me and say, oh my God, I paid $20 for this. It feels like a $2 comic. We don't have $2 comics, but it feels like a $5 comic, let's say. So for me, it's a texture thing, and it's a, so I have a certain amount of people that back it each time, and they have expectations from me. And look, that's a Frazetta cover. How do you get I got Frank to knock that out for me from beyond. But anyway, so there's actually a long story behind that cover. But anyway, so I have a responsibility to my audience. My audience comes back with every Kickstarter, and I try to feature some of the best artwork I can. As a Joe Linsden, I got guys these are all relationship people, buddy. You know that they're all guys that every time I see them at cons, I'll grab a dinner, I'll have a beer, we'll talk. And, I have guys like Dave Johnson, Dan Panosian, they're friends of mine, they're really sweet. They'll do anything for me, and vice versa. I'll do anything for them. So these are relationships, but you have a commitment here. You have a commitment to deliver quality work, to build, to get the thing out on time. And I communicate. I do constant updates and communicate with the audience. So with this, people have questions. I answer them personally. I say, hey, look, I just moved. How do I get my books? And I'm like, just go over here and I'll make sure it goes there. you know, it's a lot of work. And I always say Kickstarter is not for the weak. You know, you have to look. I just had a guy that told me he didn't get his book from 2 years ago. Right?
Would he forget?
And he forgot. And he says, look, I backed this Painkiller Jane. It was like 2 years ago. And I said, okay, you know, that campaign's long gone. And I said, I have an extra issue, but I'm going to have to charge you for the shipping, because at this point, you know, I thank God I had an extra book, but I send out like 5 emails going, hey, you know, you didn't sign your paper yet. I'm waiting for you to, you know, all that kind of stuff. But again, it's relationship, and they know when they back me, they know it's me talking to them. Me and Patrick follow up with our packages, and you know, they can tell when my box, if I packed your box, I usually put a little note on it. I write a drawer on it or something, because I'm a crazy person. But it's a contract with the people that follow you. And,
Okay.
And you have to live up to, because when you screw up, they don't want to do it anymore. You can lose your audience with one Kickstarter if you play it wrong.
And that's something I want to talk with you about. So many of these creators, Jimmy, who are in our listening audience are looking at Kickstarter as a funding mechanism, which is fair.
Sure.
I always caution the audience, and you don't necessarily have to agree with me on this.
Okay.
But I would like your opinion. I think if you're a writer, especially if you're a writer, you can go back to the 2 shot of me and Jimmy. I think if you're a writer,
right,
and you're just not that good yet,
right,
no one's going to back a second Kickstarter.
Well, you mean if their first one got backed already?
Yeah, like you're just not that good yet. I mean, you know, everybody wants their first work to be published, and I think like you think you're Alan Moore, but like you've been doing this a long time before you wrote hundreds of comics before you did Kickstarter.
I think that if you have a lot of relatives that'll back your Kickstarter, like a lot of family, I think maybe you can get away with that stuff. Or the artwork's amazing and people just want to get the art. But but if you're writing, I mean, not everything's great. You know, I get like maybe once a week I'll get somebody, hey, they send me their book and they want a quote from me, right? They always want, you know, and I'm always happy to do it. Sometimes I read it and I go, you know what? It's not at a place where I can give you a quote without me sounding like I'm trying to avoid writing a quote for you. Meaning these are the best staples in the business on this book. You know, if I read it,
this sure is a comic book.
No, and what happens is they ask me for a quote and I come back and I say, you know what? Here's the name of a professional letterer. Why don't you get your book relettered? Because right now it can't go out like this. You know, I'm exhaustingly honest and straightforward with them, but I want them to understand that I'm just trying to save them some time. Like, look, you know, I'm happy your mom said you're the best artist in the family, but I can't tell what's going on from panel to panel, you know, and, you know, it's basic stuff like that. And they don't, you know, it's not Kickstarter's responsibility to look over your project, right? This isn't like Image where they take it and then they go, no, yes or no. This is like, they'll take it based on a cover image. But I will say, it's okay to feel out people and say, hey, what do you think of this? You know, there's people in your life that'll look at it. And like I said, I've had to have some, I not too long ago, I had a guy sent me his book and I just said, look, I don't know what's going on. I told him, I said, lettering's hard to read, but I have no idea what this book is about. And it's very frustrating to me. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, who's this guy? And he's like, oh, well, that's the guy from the blah, blah. And I'm like, well, that's not in the book. And he's like, I guess I should put that in there. And I was like, okay, you know, and that happens. It's the guy that comes to fix your plumbing and everything's worse when he leaves. You know, it's just, it doesn't mean he set out to do that, but that's the reality. Sometimes not everybody's ready.
I got to tell you, you know, going back and I mentioned this in the beginning, you know, I broke in specifically because Jimmy Palmiotti gave me a break and you were leaving the book. And I said, can you just do this story arc with me? And, you know, I think I turned in the first script and I tell people this story all the time. And you looked at it and you said, I'm not reading this. You have to cut this word count by 50%. You looked at the word count and you said, I'm not reading this until you cut the word count by 50%. And then you read it. And it was terrible, but you I was so glad that you didn't let us publish that first script. You were like, okay, and I'll tell you that the people had said, like, what did you learn? I said, all right, there's a scene where Deadpool's shooting somebody off the roof as a sniper, and you go, well, how high is the building? I go, you go, how far is he shooting from? I go, he goes, you were like, you got to think about this, and you taught me that storytelling and placement is a visual medium. But I'm glad that my first work didn't get published, because it would have been my last work.
Wasn't 49 the first one?
49 was the first one,
And
and
that
then
was an
50.
interesting 49 was an interesting book because
It was.
it was definitely like storytelling wise, it was back and forth and forward and back, and it was a difficult book in our brain, right? Because we were actually using it. I remember we were using it. It was one woman played all the different women, and Deadpool was kind of buying into each one of them for different reasons. Then we learn it's the bad guy, kind of thing at the end. I just, what it was? It was like, buddy, I was just starting too, as far as writing. But the things I did learn editing and working with everybody was that we are in love with our words, and but we don't get paid by the word, thank God, and we're only as good as the artist, because if the artist can't get it, then it doesn't matter what we write. You can give an Alan Moore script to a 4-year-old with crayons. Trust me, you're not going to want to read it. So it's like, so there was a point, but you had the enthusiasm, and you were a friend. Was that 49? No, that's not it.
No, they pulled up the wrong 49.
I was gonna say that. Well, that's a great one. That's a fun one.
Yeah.
With the Punisher. But 49. Yeah, there's J.H. Williams cover with that. That was a good one. That was a 2-parter.
Yep.
That was one of the covers. That was those two girls with a million band-aids and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But we, the fun thing when we did these books, it was like we were not doing simple stories. You and I were trying to reinvent the wheel almost every issue. And I remember somebody told me, I read it, where somebody said it was the worst time for Deadpool. Like, they hated our stories. And I laughed because I'm like, yeah, but I turned that way. And 2 guys tell me, the ones with the Punisher were the favorite Deadpools they ever got. And issue 50 made them laugh out loud. And, so it's like, you can't let all that. That's just noise, But we were trying so hard to be so good on those books, and that's all that comes out. When I recently went through them, and I was laughing out loud because it's still like too many words and too many it's almost like the characters were holding the word balloons. They were so heavy, but they're also fun. 50 is a great read, and the 49 is actually a really tight read. And again, it's the enthusiasm was there, but both of us had a lot of experience, and you had a different kind of experience. You brought something else to it. I actually, all those issues of Deadpool, I saw it as a real place, like the buildings is real, and the neighborhoods, and the first 3 before you, but with Paul Chadwick.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I got very upset because they changed the last page on the 3rd issue. The last page is Deadpool kills the girl, just shoots her point blank, and then it goes on, and they changed it. The editor-in-chief at the time said no way. So they changed the ending. So I was like, my brain was a little mush after that, because it all led to that spot. That's what happens in comics, by the way. 5 years of Harley Quinn, I have them. You can't have Ivy and Harley making out. You just can't do it. And I'm like, well, but they're friends, and they're like, nope, you can't do that. That was a book of a lot of you can't do's, and then a lot of do whatever you want. And so when they say do whatever you want, Amanda and I actually, the reason the book stands out and it made a big difference was that they trusted us to do it.
Yeah, you had to earn it, and I think you had to earn the trust and build that audience. Just back to Kickstarter, because I know the audience is dying to get some more information. How should new creators who would like to get their book out, need to get funded, how should they be thinking about Kickstarter?
Realistically, they should be going for goals $2,000 to $3,000, not $20,000 or $30,000.
Sure.
They should be putting the books together for the cheapest amount they can, meaning doing everything they can on the book. If you can letter, if you can color, if you can write, you can draw. If you're going to start paying people crazy amounts, you'll never make your money back. So you have to, I would say if you're a pencil and ink team, or if you're a writer and an artist team, bring it in for as cheap as you can. Split the IP. You both should own it. If you want to partner, or if you don't want to partner, then you got to pay the other guy more money. That's what I always say. But there's every book is different, so you have to figure that out. But I would say low goals, $2,000-$3,000. That's it. Figure out how to print that book the cheapest you can.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you don't hit your Kickstarter goal, and guess what happens? You don't make the book. I think under $5,000 is realistic.
Mm-hmm.
You have to corral people. You have to get your family, your cousins, your brother's friend who you mowed his lawn once, and get him the back. I'm serious. You got to go out there and get everyone you can interested.
Yeah.
If it's a book about horses, then you better go on social media and introduce yourself to the horse community, and then start posting art with your horses. You have to do all these things because they're not set up to sell your book. You have to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, if you made friends with a professional and you can afford them to do a cover for you, well, hell, guess what? An Arthur Adams cover on your book is going to help your book, but it's going to cost you. So a lot of these things, I always say, if you're starting your Kickstarter, start it realistically. If you almost make the goal and you're like $300 short, I say put in your own money. Or get somebody in your family to put in your own money.
Yeah.
And bring it over. Hit your goal. You want to hit your goal. I've had people tell me I'm $1,000 short. It's an $8,000 book, and I'm just like, well, how badly do you want your book printed at this point? And I said, well, then there's a little thing that says you can donate to the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
I'm saying there's no law saying you can't. You're going to lose a little money, but you want to have a successful book and you want that thing printed. So you have to do it. Anything you can. Promise store owners, your local store owners, say, hey, look, I'm doing this Kickstarter. You don't have to back it, but I can pre-sell you a bunch if you want. This little everything and anything. And then if you finally do hit it, of course, make sure you have some extras because there will be damages. And in the future, there will be cons where you probably sell a couple of copies here and there,
And it turns out it's a good business model. How frequently do you think, not you, but how frequently do you think a newer creator can kickstart something?
I'd say twice a year, maybe, because there's a lot of, I'm used to it, but there's a lot to it. There's the month you do the campaign. There's the putting the book together part. It's usually a month for the printer, and then there's the getting the books out. So I would say 2 to 3 a year tops.
Yeah,
honestly, and that's if you have stuff down, packing and all that stuff. That it's not easy. Shipping. I threw out. I had a bunch of stuff Kickstarters I got today that I threw out the packing. Some were packed great. Some were like bent. Like came in an envelope that, like these kind of yellow envelopes, and I'm like, well, they always bend. I'm not a stickler. I'm not that guy that has to have the comic in perfect condition. So when it comes bent, I don't care. But
yeah, I think you just got something in a 4.0 recently graded. Yeah. You want to show that? Show it what your 4.0 was? Yeah. A CGC 4.0?
So this book came out the week I was born, 1961.
Yeah.
It's a good one. My green screen's going to make it look weird. But it's
and yet I think we all know what it is. It's is it the new crown jewel?
Well, it says from the collection of Jimmy Palmiotti on it, so that's kind of cool. so when somebody robs it from my house, they actually get busted 10 times quicker.
Perfect.
Unless they got to crack it out of this thing. But no, I had a lot of boxes of comics from when I was a kid. So CGC is down here, and it's down in Sarasota. So I just brought it over.
You drove it down. That's safer. Now, audience, I just want you to know that we're going to be taking a few questions from you. Yes. Not a huge number because at some point we have to end. We're in an hour. I know, right? Time flies.
It does.
Do we have a first question to my engineer, D. Alley? Do we have a first question from the audience? D. Alley is running our engineer. Go ahead, Jimmy. You could read it yourself.
Okay, what was the motivation behind creating Marvel Knights imprint? Was it more to go against DC's Vertigo line? We did not give a crap about DC's Vertigo line, so it was never about that. More mature Marvel stories? Nope, it was never about that. The motivation behind it was Joe and I were publishing Event Comics at the time, and Marvel Comics was in Chapter 11, and they were trying anything to bring some life to the books. And I got a call. I think it was Gareb Shamus who was up talking to Joe Calamari and said, who was the president of Marvel back then, and said, "Hey, look, you need to bring some life to this company." And he suggested I go up there and meet him. And eventually, it was me and Joe, and they were like, we'd be interested in having you guys handle some books. And I said, well, if that's the case, you have to leave us alone. You have to let us do it our way. And by the time we negotiated the 13th floor of the building.
You had your own floor, right?
Yeah, we got our own floor on Park Avenue, and we got 4 books. We picked the 4 titles. So we picked we picked Daredevil, Black Panther,
Punisher,
the Punisher, and the Inhumans, and those were our first 4 books. I say Fantastic Four because that's where Black Panther came from, and that's where the Inhumans came from. Because Fantastic Four was one of my favorite comics growing up. So I knew they weren't going to give us a Fantastic Four, but I said, okay, let's go for these other characters, that were in the FF. And so they did it out of trying something new. Joe and I approached it like we were going to publicize. We were going to be like, we're going to do like what Stan did, is put our face on the label. And then we're going to hire all our friends, and we're going to hire the best guys for the jobs. And then we went and we did everything from, Wizard Magazine promotion. We went on morning shows in New York. We did TV shows. Kevin Smith was out. We hired Kevin to do Daredevil. So Kevin was out there on Letterman doing, talking about Daredevil and Marvel Knights. And we went and did promotion outside the comic company because we knew that this is our chance to show Marvel Comics how to make comics.
and until you just said it, Jimmy, it didn't really strike me that all 4 of the books that you worked on have made it to or are about to make it to the screen. And I would imagine that the creative process that you guys had with Marvel Knights undoubtedly influenced those properties.
Yeah, I mean, Daredevil, obviously they made a TV show for a couple of seasons on Netflix. Inhumans was a TV show. I heard it wasn't that great. I never saw it. Black Panther was one of my favorite Marvel movies. And, we were responsible for creating characters that appeared in the movies. And of course, the Punisher, there's been 3 Punisher movies and a TV series, and there'll be more. But they based the Thomas Jane one off the Garth Ennis, Steve Dillon, and I's when we did that book. Yeah, no, we actually, I remember when we were doing Marvel Knights, it hit big. And we planned it 4 titles come out 1 week, every week for a month, right? For that month. So the first week was Daredevil, second week was Black Panther, third week was Inhumans, fourth week was Punisher. We planned it that you could not go to the comic store without seeing a Marvel Knights title for the rest of the year and 2 years. And we were in a place where I remember I met Wesley Snipes at a party. John Singleton invited me to a party, and Wesley Snipes came up to me and started telling me, you got to make me Black Panther. I want to be Black Panther. And I was like, okay, I think we're successful with these comics now. This kind of thing is happening. But our whole thing behind Marvel Knights was we're going to show them how great these characters are by making books better than they made them.
Yeah.
It was a very young attitude. It was a young, like, I'm going to show them kind of, it doesn't mean they were better than, obviously Stan and Jack and all that stuff. But we thought they were better than the way they were being treated at the time.
I would agree.
And we also knew the art could be better. And we brought in computer coloring, which they weren't using. And we brought in a couple of things that now became the steady Marvel way of doing things. And that's because we were huge fans of the characters. So the idea, they hired us, we love the characters. And I think the love is the first 2 years of Marvel Knights is a gigantic love letter from Joe and I about those books, and they still stand up. I think I just did a signing where I signed 1 million of those Daredevil 9s with the Echo in them.
Yeah.
There's a TV, it's like that stuff always comes back to me. And I don't even have those books anymore. I have the trades. That's about it.
All right, your adoring audience has another question, and Rob Anderson's going to read it. He's that booming voice. Do it, Rob.
All right, from the comic book school community, Randall Bishop asks, question for Jimmy. Can you talk about the process of taking a comic book IP to film and how you market the finished film? Do you start with a specific end in mind, or is it more like fishing?
All right. I mean, that's two different questions, I guess, right? So the process of taking IP to film basically is the IP needs to exist. So as great as it is telling all your friends about this great book you got or this idea you have, it's not an intellectual property until you actually make it exist, meaning you do a digital book, you do a comic book. It has to exist where somebody else can read it and it came out, so an intellectual property, we all have 100 of them in our heads. And I always say there's like this cloud above us with 1 million ideas and we just got to pull them down. But the IP, so for me, at least in my experience, the IP exists out there. So I do a book, it's out there. A lot of them get picked up in the stores. People buy them in the stores. That includes everyone on the West Coast in Hollywood. They hear there's a little noise about it. People want to know what it is. I have a management company that handles me. And if somebody's interested, eventually they track me down or them and they ask to have a copy of the book or something. I'll use Random Acts of Violence as an example, since that was a film that came out this past summer.
Mm-hmm.
It was by Jay Baruchel, read the comic. He approached the company. I partnered with the company, so I owned half. Justin and I own half, and Kickstart Entertainment owned the other half.
Mm-hmm.
And they approached Kickstart. We did a development deal with it. It went on and on for years. They renewed the deal. Nothing got done. And all of a sudden, Jay was starting to shoot it. Amanda and I went to Toronto. We went to the set to visit the set and meet Jay and watch them shoot it. And it was a lot of fun. But, while I was up there, they would show me the script and it's different than the book. And I understand that. It's okay. My book still exists, so I don't have to worry. And at the end of the day, how I helped promote it was when it came out, Jay and I did a lot of talk shows together. We did like a lot of, because it was COVID. So we did a lot of programs where he was in his basement and I was in this fake backdrop room. And we would flatter each other, basically. Jay and I would get on and I'd say, oh, Jay's great. And he'd go, oh, no, Jimmy's great. And we did a lot of that. But we talked up the film. It only came out in a couple of drive-ins. And then it was on that horror channel, Shudder. Yeah, Shudder. So Shudder bought it as a Shudder original. And it's on there now. You can watch it on Shudder. But, so it was a fun process. I mean, I didn't have a lot of input in the film. And, I gave them notes for the first script. But because it was like 8 or 10 years past where you kept renewing it, the script came into like 4 or 5 different spots. So when you watch the movie, it's very interesting to see how different it is from the comic. And yet it's pretty much the comic in a weird way.
I remember you had a lot of input in Painkiller Jane. I remember you were even friends with Christiana Loken.
Yeah, Christiana, and I were friends. And that was, so I worked in the writer's room on that one. And I was a consultant on it. So that I had a lot of input, and then as much as I have, I don't, and but it was a great experience working on a TV show and getting to go to Vancouver and, be on set and them to turn to me and go, well, what do you think? And I'm like, yeah, it looks good to me,
All right. Next question for Jimmy Palmiotti. Go ahead and give it a read, Rob.
Aaron from the background asks, what do you think the best margin is for a beginner book if you aren't paying out for help?
The best margin.
So if you're not paying out, you mean you're doing the book with somebody else and nobody's getting paid? So what's the best margin? $1 billion. $1 billion.
On Kickstarter. What Dee's asking is on Kickstarter.
Okay. So if you're delivering a digital book, then you don't have to worry about shipping. So that's fantastic. That's good news. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing a comic book, you're going to have to go to a printer and figure out. So if you set your Kickstarter at, let's say, $5,000, well, what would in my row of things I'm offering on my Kickstarter, how much would $5,000 be? How many books is that I'm going to have to print? And then you can get it. You can figure that average. Say, okay, so for 5,000, I'm going to have to print 1,000 books. And you can go to a printer and say, hey, I got a 68-page book. Going to be 1,000 of them. How much is it going to cost? They give you a price. Okay, that's what it's going to cost. How much is it to ship? Okay, how much is this going to be to ship out to people per package? Go to the post office, bring a compatible book, and say, weigh it, and say, hey, how much is this? Get my book rate. Okay, that's going to be $278 per package. All right, how much is that cardboard thing to wrap it up in? Oh, that's another, it's another 70 cents. And so you have to do a lot of math. And there's no easy way to do it, but there are a lot of good YouTube videos on people explaining how to figure out the price for your Kickstarter. So I would recommend it. I just touched a little bit on it, but that's how you have to figure it out. And then at the end of the day, you want to pay yourself, so you have to figure in for that too. But I will be honest with you, I never pay myself for my Kickstarters. I don't take the money. I put it into an account and I roll it into my next Kickstarter, and I pay the next bunch of talent. I get my profit from other places. Not everybody can do that, but that's what I do. I'd rather give the money to the artist, to be honest with you.
And I remember you saying that you had this this passion. And I remember even back in the day when you were writing monthlies, you said, what I love is that you love to tell a story that has a beginning, middle, and an end, not necessarily a long meandering thing you have to write, like you said, for a decade. Right. You always had these chunk stories. And I think Kickstarter has worked for you because you can put out a deluxe hardcover and tell a story.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in done in ones. I cannot stand 30-part stories because they never live up to anything, and you wind up spending. Let me tell you something. You buy a graphic novel from me and it's $25, and it's like, let's say it's a hardcover and it's like 110 pages. Let me tell you something. That story you're paying $5.99 for 40 weeks in a row, you add that up, you're spending like 15 times more than I ever charge you for it. And then by the end of it, you're like, that's it? Or they go, well, it doesn't really count because that's like in an alternate universe. What? The comic fan in me is always like, okay. When we did Jonah Hex, we did them done in one stories because my brain was like, this might be the first comic somebody picks up. Mm-hmm. It should be easy. It should be approachable. Like, I don't feel I can read an X-Men comic now because I don't know. There's so many different titles. And Batman, I don't even care about because nothing matters in Batman. Because the Joker, he keeps getting out and killing people, and they keep putting him back in jail. There's nothing matters to me in Batman anymore. I know it's like an older brain thinking, but they keep doing the same thing over and over. So I don't have, an interest in that. And like I said, some comics but comics aren't made for people my age. So I will say that right now. The books I do are made for people that are a little older, that have kind of read a lot of superhero books and now know that they want to try some other things.
Well, we're going to have time for one more question, and then we're going to do a final wrap.
Okay.
Rob?
And from an alternate universe, we have a question from Miriam Mark Media. If there was one project you'd like to grow out of the ones you have created, what would it be? And the only one you could select, what would it be? Why?
To grow out of what I've done already. My brain went right to Painkiller Jane. Because I just love the character, but it's too easy. I might say Monolith, I think would be an interesting thing because Justin and I now own all the rights to Monolith. And I think I would like to do more. I just got the rights back to G.I. Zombie as well, which was a series I did with Scott Hampton. So I think I'd like to maybe, I'm realizing that I have an actual universe of characters that I can put into a book and have them all in the same place because G.I. Zombie is like ageless. Monolith is in New York. Jane is in New York. I was realizing the other day is like I could actually do a book with all my characters in it, like and it would kind of work. And it was a thought that's been in my head for a couple of days, and I'm like, that might be a fun thing to do. Yeah, by the way, most people wouldn't know who the hell they are, but I would make it approachable on some level. If somebody like Monolith, I did a Monolith Painkiller Jane because I just thought, well, it'd kind of be fun to see her with him. That's the way I thought it. But, so I guess that. I mean, that's a tough question because each thing you create, and Buddy, this, each
you
thing
love for a different reason, right?
There's a connection to it that I like Trigger Girl because Phil Noto. I got to work with Phil, more than the comic. I love working with Phil. So I look at that and I go, well, I could never do that character without Phil Noto, and I will. Phil, by the way, Phil, don't. But like even the Pro, I look at the Pro and I'm like, I wouldn't do that without Amanda, because
Right.
but I would love to build on the Pro universe, because that just takes a piss on everything that superhero comics does. It's sort of like The Boys, but with a female prostitute. If you never read it, and it's written by Garth Ennis, which makes total sense. That's a good question. So maybe I'll do my own crossover with my own character. Right. Yeah, who knew? Why not? Nobody else is going to do it.
We you know what? We're going to credit Marianne for asking the question and give a "you heard it here first" type of slushy and fizzy feeling. So I think that's it for the question. So while we're on the topic, what would you want people to keep a lookout for that's either on the stands now, or is coming? You probably have a little bit of both.
Stands right now. Amanda and I are writing Red Sonja, and for Dynamite Comics, and we're Moritat is the artist on it. My guy from All Star Western. So I'm so happy to be working with him on it. That's 10 issues. I think the 4th one just came out, so you can still grab them. Coming up, Kickstarter wise, I have Painkiller Jane book I'm doing. It's a one-shot. It's definitely it's definitely adult book. There's a lot of nudity. There's a lot of I just kind of went crazy on it, and that'll be there soon. I'm trying to think like the other stuff I have. Those are my main 2 things right now. I got to be honest with you. I'm working on stuff that is like for like a year from now. I did a book for Marvel that I'm waiting for them to figure out when they're going to put it out, but I can't talk about it. And I will say I have nothing coming from DC. So that'll make it easier.
All right. Well, I think people would, to stay in the know, they would need to subscribe to your newsletter on paperfilms.com. Am I right?
Yes, very easy. Paperfilms.com. A little thing pops up. Just fill it out, and you'll be on our list. You can check out the website, obviously, but we'll hit you up once a month, and we'll tell you where Amanda and I are going to be as far as conventions, what we got coming out, and we do previews of the pages, and it's sort of like Substack without any reading. There's not much reading in it, and you don't have to pay me. Although I do love the idea of Substack.
It is a great idea. It's just we'll wait till see how the money works out.
I want to see it. I want to see it aimed more towards the artists and less the writers, though. That's me, because it's a visual medium. I just want to see more art.
I understand. So, and where can they find you, Jimmy, if they wanted to follow you on social or?
So I'm at J Palmiotti on Twitter. I'm under my name in Instagram, and those are the only 2 social media I do. I don't do Facebook because I don't trust them. I had some security breaches with Facebook, so I don't do it anymore. They let information out too easily. I think it's a flawed site, but Twitter's a lot easier. Mustache is gone. Mary just wrote that. I don't know what that means because I had a mustache. I do have them once in a while.
You had the biker one, the whatever we call that.
I am Italian. I can grow hair in 2 days. Everywhere except up here. In my ears, in my nose, and I can have a beard. On the top of my head, for some reason, it wants to be like a band roll-on eventually. The hair is just going. I think that's old age, buddy. I just turned my birthday was like 2 weeks ago, and I turned a horrible 60. So, yeah.
But you look young and you're vibrant, and
I don't feel it. I mean, 60 is like a weird number.
Yeah.
Buddy's like 41 forever. So it's just, it doesn't, but I just figured I have the knowledge now, now I have the power,
Yeah.
But I think age is it's definitely, if you're a happy person, you don't age. If you're miserable or drinking too much, then your face shows it, definitely shows wear and tear. That's why Buddy and I will always look the same.
Yeah,
even though he's much younger than me.
I'm much older than him. You know, one thing that you told me when we were writing comics together, and I never forgot this. You know, I was stressed. I wanted to do a great job, and you said, "Remember to have fun.
Yes.
This is the best time of your life. Remember to have fun. Don't let it pass by without appreciating it." And that stays with me. Like everything we do, comic book school, I take a minute to remember how great this moment is for me, for everybody involved.
Yeah, I mean, your photo books, I got to tell you, you know, for drawing, I recommend them all the time.
Thank
I
you.
recommend them all the time because I'm like, you know what? There it is right there. If you can't look at that, there they are back there in the back. Although, and there's the CD versions too.
Yeah, had we would not have comic book school, Jimmy, if not for you encouraging me to get those CDs out there. You are
I don't
solely
have
responsible for that.
I don't have a thing for CDs anymore though.
No, nobody does. That's why we went to books, and we have a bright future where people can steal all the images when I
But
publish them.
the books are the best thing. I will tell you, if you're drawing, you should always have a book in front of you, the books, because you can open them up, you can pull the pages out, rip them out, you can stick them on the wall when you're drawing. You know, they're made to be filthy and beaten and drawn over. And I saw somebody take one of your books and do like line drawings over the photos
Wow.
so they can see
Wow.
the shapes, you know. And I think you can't do that with a lot of stuff. Although you could do that on your Cintiq. I got a Cintiq here. You could do it on. But anyway, those are great books.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, those are awesome.
Thank you. And had it not been your encouragement, those CD-ROMs would have never come out. And
Yeah, I don't believe that, buddy. You would have done it anyway. Everybody, he's like a force of nature. He's the sweetest guy, nicest guy in comics. Anybody says anything bad about Buddy, I will go after them. they do not. No, by the way, nobody ever says a bad word about you.
Oh, thank you.
But if they did,
if they did, you'd be all over it. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, man. I have weapons here. You can't see. They're right off frame. I have a whole arsenal of weapons.
You know what? We don't want to see them. No.
Right there.
Yeah, right there.
Over here and up there. There's a couple hanging up there, and there's some over there, and there's some over there.
Behind that Batman collection.
Yeah, right. I'm looking at the books in the background. I'm like, oh, I have some of those books. So
you should have everything. You're on the comp list for life.
Well, yeah, one of them. I'm still on one. I don't want to say out loud which one because they'll cut me off.
Yeah. So listen, everybody, you can find Comic Book School at comicbookschool.com. We have a message board where we'll be talking about this very episode. Join the community at create.comicbookschool.com. You can find us at Twitter and Instagram at Comic Book School. And apparently, I'm told on TikTok, which I'm not 100% sure how it works, but apparently
do TikTok videos, buddy.
I don't know. We have a TikTok. I'm not sure what we do. Yeah, but
okay.
I don't know.
Buddy there. Buddy is slowly learning how to TikTok. He's been using the music and he's been shaking it.
You have to get like you and a cat doing something. I'm going to leave it at that.
Leave it at that. Rob, your voice is on. Who can we expect next week for our Tuesday? Jimmy, we own Tuesday evenings. So who's on for next Tuesday for Comic Book School?
Next Tuesday night, same buddy time, same buddy stations. Buddy sits down with YA writer and editor Stephanie Cook as she gives advice to our Comic Book School community and talks all about her creative projects, including the smash hit, Oh My Gods. We will see you next Tuesday for another creative journey hosted by Buddy Scalera and produced through Comic Book School.
Kind of makes you want to go, doesn't it, Jimmy? I mean,
it makes me want to be like a game show host. That voice. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are. Come on, give us some more of that voice.
Buddy needs to do more TikToks. Please tell everyone on the community boards on what you want to see Buddy doing next week and how he should be dressed. I'll even dress up as Cat Dad and do a duet with him.
Oh, Buddy, I think the Speedo needs to come out of
My face is getting red. Okay, so Jimmy, my final question that we ask all of our esteemed guests. Okay. What's one piece of advice you wish someone had given you when you were first breaking into comics?
Have a lawyer look at your contracts, is my advice. If you get a contract, have a lawyer. To find a publishing lawyer, pay the extra dollars, whatever it may be, have them look at it. Don't sign anything that has the words in perpetuity. Never sign. If you see that on your contract, you give it back and say you have to take that off. You want the rights to come back to whatever you create, come back to you eventually. I wish I had that when we did the Ash deal. We had a lawyer, but the lawyer was a little green, I think, at the time. And, things were bought forever. And, so I think that's my one piece of advice. And don't be a dick. Be nice to people.
You know what? That makes a perfect tweet.
There you go. Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick. All right, Jimmy, we're going to ask you to go to the green room, and then we're going to have my final thoughts. So don't hang up and just go to the green room. Guys, I don't know about you, but I absolutely loved this episode. I love talking with Jimmy, and I will tell you unabashedly that Jimmy has had a measurable impact on my life and my career. And I'm not the only person who says that. Jimmy has always said that he believes in paying it forward because people helped him when he needed help, so he helps others. And from the bottom of my heart, I have to tell you, if you can ever find a mentor like Jimmy Palmiotti, find them and stick with them. Make them your friend. And I am very proud to say that Jimmy is my friend. We spent a lot of time together. We've collaborated and we've commiserated. I hope that you've learned a lot from this episode about the craft and business of making comics, and continue to join us every Tuesday. Do the like, share, alert buttons, whatever the kids do on the internet, but do that. And again, focus on your career, be consistent, and of course, as Jimmy noted, know when it's time to leave the room. And it's time for me to leave the room. Have a great night, everybody.
We'll see you next Tuesday.